Teachers, what is the worst thing that happened on a school trip? Story 1. Ask my students to be respectful of other pedestrians while on the trip because some people want to enjoy the nature center by themselves. One kid saw a woman with her service dog and tried to pull on it because Mommy would let me have it. We had to leave because of that, and he ruined the entire trip for everyone. Story 2. Former assistant teacher here. We were on a 6th grade field trip to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Cool place. So at the time, one of the attractions was a sort of centripetal force machine that you can sit in and get swung around. Now this is a poor explanation, but imagine the Gravitron only smaller and faster with seats and no walls. I googled it but can't find the ride. I'm guessing it was swapped out for something else. Well, one dumb kid thought it would be funny to show off and see what happens when you undo your seatbelt while riding. Naturally, he got flung out of the machine at roughly half the speed of sound and broke his fall with nothing but his face. Glasses busted, massive concussion, totally wrecked. There was a whole investigation, and the teacher in charge of that kid's group had to actually defend himself from accusations that he could have somehow stopped that level of stupidity. Sadly, I didn't witness it, but did hear the impact from one room over. Pretty interesting day. I'm sure that was a pretty distinctive thud when the face hits the floor. Glad the kid wasn't more seriously injured because that's actually pretty funny and cool that he got what was coming for him. That was a swift lesson in the importance of following the rules and not messing around. I bet that museum has readjusted their safety procedures after this incident too. You can't take these kids anywhere. Story 3. I went on a class trip as chaperone to a science center. I was in charge of a group of 8 boys. One of them goes missing. I asked the others where he went, and they don't know either. He's missing for about 10 minutes until a security guard from the center comes up to me with him. The guy asks, "Is he one of yours?" and tells this kid to open his backpack when I say yes. Probably $200 worth of stolen stuff in there. He spent the rest of the trip right next to me. Story 4. I am a teacher, but my anecdote comes from when I was a kid back in the mid-90s. We were visiting some museum in London and were traveling on the train and the tube with teachers. On the way back, some students didn't get on the tube before the automatic doors shut, and the teacher in charge just yelled as loud as he could, "See you back at school, lads!" And we just went home, and the teacher waited at the school later on, and sure enough, about 40 minutes after everyone else got back, the remaining kids turned up. If that happened to me now as a teacher in 2019, I'd be fired, probably out of a cannon into an abyss marked RIP career. Story 5. In the kindergarten field trip, we had the parent of our most challenging student come along as a chaperone. Her group was her own son and a very sweet, obedient girl. Let's call him Jim and the girl Shonda. Typically, we teachers set up base camp, while the parents take the groups of students through the park. We do a scavenger hunt, and the parents bring us their cards for a stamp as they go through each section. The first time the zoo employee brought us Jim, he said that the boy was in the monkey exhibit trying to climb over the fences. Luckily, he had on a school shirt, and Jim was brought right to us. We called his mother's phone, and she didn't answer. And about 15 minutes later, the mom shows up and says, "Jim, how did you get in front of us? We were walking together just a minute ago." We teachers explained that, in fact, Jim had been with us for a bit and the zoo ranger had brought him over. No real response once from the mom. We asked her to turn on her phone. We went off again. Now, the second time they brought us Jim, he had gotten into the fountain. I had taken several employees to chase him down as he ran and giggled. Same drill, we called the mom. No answer. Jim was sopping wet with gross fountain water, and he did not seem too concerned. The mom did not show up for like 45 minutes. Again, she said, "Jim, how did you get in front of us? We were walking together just a minute ago." Now this time I was watching Shonda, and the look on that little girl's face said it all. Total amazement that an adult was lying. They went off again to walk to the picnic area. Yes, the third time the zoo brought back little Jim, it was a police officer. Apparently, the zoo was watching the cameras, and the minute the mom was out of sight, she let go of Jim and basically ditched him. The mom got a citation for failure to maintain responsibility for her child and a 1-year ban from the zoo. The police officer accompanied her and Jim back to the buses and waited with them until it was time to leave. They did not participate in the picnic. Shonda had the best moral to the story. No wonder he is so bad. His mama won't even keep him safe when there is a tiger around. He is now a very troubled 4th grader. He doesn't get to go on field trips without one-on-one support from a school staff member. That is pretty crappy of the mom to put all of those other teachers as well as the zoo staff in that position. When you know that your son is such a problem child and you walk around like it is somebody else's problem, that is just rude and irresponsible. Especially because you don't have to take your kid to the zoo if you know that they're going to act up. I get that you want them to have the experience and be with the rest of the class, but you don't just get to abandon them like that. Story 6. I took 3 classes of 6th graders, age 11 and 12, to visit the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. We'd come from about an hour and a half away, and the kids and other teachers on buses, but since I was hugely pregnant, I was allowed to drive my own car. It had been raining, but I arrived a bit ahead of the bus, so when the kids got off, I was there to lead them to the museum. As I began walking towards the kids getting off the bus, I noticed a lot of papers on the sidewalk, and suddenly realized that there were an assortment of extremely revealing pictures. I stopped to try and gather them up before the kids got an unexpected and completely adult lesson, and we had already had a big talk about being mature when viewing classical art. But we were not prepared for the most lurid adult art LA had to offer. Unfortunately, the rain had plastered the papers to the sidewalk, and the sight of the very pregnant teacher scrambling on hands and knees on Wilshire Boulevard sent the chaperones and teachers rushing to my aid, with 100 kids right after them, no matter how urgently I tried to wade them back. Story 7. I'm an English teacher in Korea, and field trips are different here. Usually, there are no additional chaperones. The teacher is responsible for all 25 students in their homeroom class during the trip. That means a field trip is often 8 classes of 25 students. That's 200 kids, and a maximum of 10 chaperones if some office staff get along. One of my first trips was a large traditional market. It's a popular place to go, and there are usually thousands of people there at all times. Our buses arrived, and we all piled off in the parking lot. The kids were told via megaphone, "Be back here in 1 hour. Go!" And all 200 of them scattered into the crowds and tents, while most of the teachers got back into the buses to have coffee. Surprisingly, 99% of the kids were back on the buses when they were supposed to be. However, a good number had bought small hamsters, turtles, or goldfish. 2 weeks later, I couldn't find a single kid whose spontaneous pet was still alive. Story 8. When I was in the AmeriCorps, I was a tutor at a school where a popular 7th grader drowned on the class's end-of-the-year field trip at a lake at a state park the summer before I started. There were no lifeguards on duty. He was in chest-deep water when he went under the lake and never came up. His friends and the chaperones tried to find him, but by the time they did, it was too late. This was an underserved school in a really rough neighborhood, and according to the teachers, things were getting better at the school, but this really messed up the kids. It was a very challenging year for them. Story 9. Not a teacher, but I've got one from my college days. Our history class had gone to see a Civil War battlefield. One of the trails my professor wanted to go on was blocked off by a wire fence and marked as unsafe. The professor just looked at a hole in the fence, looked back at the class, and said, "Well, if they didn't want people going through, they wouldn't have left a convenient human-sized hole there," and then let us all through. We walked down through the trail, had a good discussion and a couple of pictures, but when we got back, a park ranger was there chewing out the teaching assistant who stayed by the bus. He let us go with a warning, but stalked us in a ranger vehicle for the rest of the day. I feel like a trail on an old battlefield that is marked unsafe might actually be something you want to pay close attention to. Typically, there are devices used in war that explode, or in this case, may not have exploded and could still be dangerous. That would have been a real jerk move if that teacher had gotten rest of the class in trouble too, like a ban from all other national parks or something. Not their fault for just following the lead of their teacher. Story 10. Not a teacher, but in 4th grade, a turkey flew through the windshield of the bus. We were driving through the middle of nowhere on our way to a farm or something. Don't remember what it was supposed to be because we ended up just going back to the school. Some teachers near the front were picking glass out of their forehead. I think the driver was mostly okay, but still needed to be checked out. And I don't think any of us kids were hurt at all. Maybe we were too short at that age for the glass to make its way over the seats enough to actually maim anyone. I have no idea. But yeah, a teacher kicked the dead bird off the bus, did a quick head count, fluttered over the bus driver, and then we just lined up against a wooden fence at the edge of somebody's property while waiting for another bus to come get us. Story 11. I wasn't a teacher, but I was a junior counselor at a summer camp, which basically meant I was still a kid myself at the upper age limit for the camp, which was 13, and I attended for free in exchange for helping the real counselors with the younger kids. Now, mostly we did nothing and had no real authority, but when it came time for the big summer trip to an amusement park, suddenly me and another junior counselor were saddled with watching a group of 8 kids for the day with no adults. Everything went better than expected until the end of the day when we were trying to corral our group to leave. We didn't want to go, so we jumped in line for this sightseeing ride and got on before we could stop them. It basically was a slowly rotating observation room that went up a tall tower, stopped for a while, and then came back down. Now it got stuck halfway down while we were frantically trying to find a real adult to let them know what happened. This was before cell phones were common, so I waited at the ride while my co-junior counselor went to find someone from our group. It kept us from leaving for an additional half hour to an hour while they got unstuck. The counselors got in trouble for letting two 13-year-olds escort a group alone, and I stopped going to the camp a week later because the other counselors started bullying me in retaliation. Story 12. At an apple orchard with young preschoolers, one kid, who was always an issue in some way or another, crapped his pants, fully, and didn't say anything. I just happened to pass him and smell it. There were no restrooms, just a porta potty. Had to stand him on the edge and try to get as much of the flattened turd out of his pants because there was no way he was going to sit in crap-filled pants for the 30-minute drive back. I was gagging, and the kid was doing everything but following my directions. At one point, I thought he was going to fall into the hole. It was awful. Story 13. Okay, so not a teacher, but one time on a trip to the movies in 8th grade, one of the chaperones was my English teacher who was deathly allergic to citrus. I think we know where this is going. On the bus ride back to school, a kid takes an orange, peels it, and throws it at her hard. Hard enough to the point where orange juice got all over her shirt. Not sure if it was revenge related or just being a jerk. Anyway, she immediately starts having an allergic reaction, and we have to pull over on the side of the highway and wait for an ambulance. We go back to school and the day is over. The school sends out an email basically saying, hey, please don't attempt to kill your teachers with allergic reactions and that she will be fine. Although, we had a substitute for 4 days and the kid got expelled. I hope that kid got a good old-fashioned butt whooping when he got home and after being expelled. It seems like a combination of just the kid being a jerk and bully led him to believe that this was a funny idea. I doubt that any of the other kids think that this was cool or funny when they're watching their teacher struggle to breathe. It's always funny when you think about what you think is hilarious when you're in 8th grade, but in the comments, what has someone done that was incredibly stupid as a kid but you thought was brilliant at the time? Story 14. 5th grade field trip to a zoo. During a tour of the primate exhibits, a notoriously ill-behaved student hurls a stick down into the gorilla habitat and it lands near an adult gorilla. Now, without hesitation, the now angry gorilla arms himself with the same stick and sends it back like a tomahawk to the boy with terrifying velocity and wildly impressive precision. The stick shatters around the boy's face and he goes down. Commotion ensues. More gorillas make an appearance and begin to scream at the group of horrified children. The zoo staff start piling in out of the woodwork to see what's going on. The orangutans on the other side of the trail have now got wind of the situation and have begun mobilizing to assist their gorilla comrades. It's a war on two fronts now. Gorillas and orangutans launch volleys of feces and students scatter. Throughout the entire exhibit, all manner of primates begin their intimidating chatter and howling. An army of zoo staff has swarmed the primate exhibits and manages to stop the war of the Planet of the Apes. 30 minutes later, the zoo has indefinitely banned the school from returning, and the boy's on the way to the hospital for 5 stitches in his chin. Story 15. Not a teacher, but this happened on our school trip. We were 12 and about to finish elementary school, so our teacher took us to a 2-day vacation near a lake in Vanta, Finland. Our teacher didn't give us a planned schedule. He just said that we were going to do anything that we wanted. Apparently, a guy and a girl took this literally, and both of them lost their virginity at the age of 12. They both went to heat up the sauna, but never came back. Our worried teacher went to check that they hadn't both suffocated, since wood-heated saunas tend to release a lot of carbon monoxide. So, there we were, immediately separated, and our teacher had to make 2 uncomfortable phone calls to the kids' parents. I still remember those phone calls, word by word. I'll try to do my best translating them. First, hi, Mrs. Johnson, it's about Jamie. No, nothing bad happened to him. It's just, well, what, in your opinion, is the correct age to lose your virginity? Yes? Yes? Uh-huh? Yes? Jamie, your mother wants to speak with you. Second, hi, Mr. Smith, I have some bad news. No, Erica's fine and all. It's just that, well, yes, no, nothing like that. Much worse. Mr. Smith, is it appropriate to lose your virginity in elementary school? Uh-huh. Yeah. Now, for the safety of the student, I can't tell you. No, he is the same age as your daughter. Well, I stopped them, yeah. Okay, sure thing, I'll tell her. Erica, your dad is coming to pick you up. He's here in 45 minutes. Story 16. Not a teacher, but a ski instructor, many of my younger students will come from public school on field trips. My boss always says, get them away from the bunny hill, the easiest hill to go on the chairlift. So, The parents and teachers don't see them fall. My worst story was when I had a group on the younger side, 6 to 10 years, and the youngest girl had a panic attack on the chairlift. Now, luckily, I was able to get her to calm down till the top of the hill. By the time we finally got to the top of the chairlift, she had already wet herself. So I had to get her and the rest of the group down to the chalet and find my boss with an army of children. I could not tell them the reason why we're going back because it could hurt her feelings. Now, mind you, she was screaming and crying the whole time. It took 30 minutes to get down the hill since none of the kids had skied before and my junior ski instructor did nothing. I would have sent him down the hill with her, but he did not listen to a word I told him, and I didn't want a missing child case. All the other kids were complaining that they had to go back and stop skiing. And trust me, there was nothing more fun than explaining to your boss that there was an issue like that. That had to be an actually funny sight to see a bunch of kids who have no idea how to ski just like rolling down the hill in various forms. I'm picturing some sort of scene out of a circus. But that is pretty sad and probably really embarrassing for the girl who had the accident on the lift. I'm sure she felt that all the other kids were annoyed with her, but they probably were just having a blast falling down the hill. Story 17. When I was in the 2nd grade, we took a field trip to the Forest Preserve. For me, it was an awesome field trip. Being led by a guide through this cool hiking trail and learning things about nature was my kind of thing. About halfway through the hike, a few of us decided to take the fun way across a thick log over a little creek. This kid named Marcelo was in front of me, and he was goofing off a bit too much and slipped. He fell into the creek, but in the process smacked his face onto the log. We helped him get out of the water and then noticed his mouth was bleeding profusely. When he smacked his face on that log, he got a stick about 2 inches long jammed up into his gums. It was pretty damn gnarly, and the park ranger that was leading the hike called for an ambulance. Story 18. I work with 18 to 21-year-old students with disabilities. We took the students on our annual canoe trip at the end of the year. It's typically like a 2-hour canoe ride through a chain of lakes, and this particular year didn't go so well. One of the students was aggressively yelling at other students to paddle harder. Another student got annoyed and turned around and started beating this student with his paddle. We had to get all the canoes, there were probably 7 of them, to shore to get these 2 students out because they were bludgeoning one another. Story 19. Our bus driver stopped on train tracks as a train was coming. Our bus full of 1st graders was approaching train tracks as the lights flashed and the gate started to lower. Now, our driver decided not to stop at the tracks like any bus should by law and thought maybe she could beat the lowering arms. She realized she couldn't and braked on the track, the first of 2. The gate arms slammed onto our bus and a man stopped at a red light, got out of his car to lift it off the side of the bus. I panicked from the front seat as the incoming train whistled and the parent chaperones and I screamed for her to move back. She kept saying, "I can't go in reverse," and she had no panic in her voice at all. Thankfully, the train came on the 2nd track, and I can't remember if she actually backed up or not. I was absolutely traumatized and spent the beginning of the trip on the phone with transportation. They sent us another driver for the way home, and our original driver sat awkwardly to the front seat. We take the same trip every year, and every year I cringe when we cross the tracks. When a negligent bus driver is that calm about her negligence, and then it starts to feel suspiciously intentional, which is a terrifying thought when you are responsible for safely transporting children. Did the driver have a death wish or something? Drunk, or perhaps just hated the children for some reason? I'm glad that they did have the outcome that we did have, because that story could have turned out far more tragic. Now, interesting fun fact though, railroad arms are designed to pop off pretty easily if a vehicle runs into them. So I'm kind of surprised that that didn't happen when they hit the side of a school bus.